Still here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Jupiter, our Mercury day. We have a couple of things that are updating with this really long update with Venus and the Sun. And yesterday I had several things that is going to be both an astrological reading and an energy reading. Um, One of the things that came up was relating to the old way. And this is with Saturn ruling over Sun Venus conjunction, um, and Saturn about to conjoin Neptune. First of all, I'll bring you a story. In Netherlands, there was a big story about Hussein Bibisin, and he was a drug lord. And so the big deal was he was sent to prison for molesting children. And a lot of people said that Joris Deming, that was working with him, by the way, one of the things that they were working together was to have housing for people that are drug addicted so that they wouldn't be deprived of housing. And so, as you can see, that the intricacy, because the allegations here are child molestation. And so Joris Deming put Hussein Babizin in prison for molestation of children while there were allegations against Joris Deming, who was Supreme Court judge in Netherlands. Now, one of the things with Saturn Neptune, and I addressed the global extortion cult situation in the past, but one of the things with Saturn Neptune is that there was this mythization that drug lords or organized crimes or crime families do not harm women, which is if they the way that drugs are trafficked are by trafficking children. They are used to traffic children, to traffic women, to have people drugged up with shit tons of drugs. These drugs needs to go from somewhere and put on camera. So the mythization of the mafia boss, and a lot of mafia bosses, I'm not going to name names because it's not about bashing or shaming, it's about showing structural changes that are happening with the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which is the reality check on Neptune, which is both channeling, even astrology, by the way, the mafia, holistic medicine, medicine in general, surgery, psychiatry, drugs prescribed or not, and amazing. Um, and so, with Saturn is also the mythical role of the father. And so, this big hype about mythization of drug lords, and both about devaluation of drug lords, because our greatest empires were basically looting other empires by causing them opiates addiction and having them giving up all their metal, their silver, their resources. It's a form of economic hitmanship that Gladio did not invent. Now, it's both the understanding that what we call drug lord is literally each and every empire, and what happened in Venezuela really shows what happened if we really did acted against drug trafficking. Well, here's the leader of this country, and then when we ask ourselves about drug lords, it's one and the same with child trafficking, human trafficking. And I'm talking about child sex trafficking and extortion calls. And so that's what allowed Gladio to operate under classified project funded by public money to deprive the people of their right to food sovereignty, housing sovereignty, income that is honoring their well-being. And with that, we both have the wait a second, was Babyzine really not affiliated with child trafficking? Is he not guilty of child molestation? We can talk about the Supreme Court role, but what Saturn Neptune is dealing with is those drug oriented structures. And in those societies, the pride or the patriarchal which is associated also with Orthodox religion, with Saturn Pisces. And the patriarchal is creating something that is negating both when we talk about Lilith in Sagittarius, negating life. And then those views of honor, of oaths, and when the rite of passage is horrid ritual abuse of men by men, of boys by men, of boys by boys, before it even gets to the women. That a Saturn return in these societies means that a person goes through horrible ritual abuse, even when the true seers are open, have to be abusing a child again when they're 28. And that, of course, is probably recorded so that they are trusted, so to sagen, and then they can go on to the next level. The next level would be politics. The next level would be bigger decisions, global organizations. And that's the rite of passage. And another thing that came to me was, and the fact that that's the rite of passage shows that inevitably, with Saturn sextiling Uranus, so many structures are changing. And so it is incompetence to not have zero rape, zero trafficking society. Zero slavery, zero rape, zero trafficking society on a global society. Nothing and no one can justify that. And so these people that are used to have their authority respected as, I have the power to make the entire city zero crime for 3 days. Amazing. Do it for 365 days a year. If you have the power to do that, then do that. And there is nothing that justifies not doing that. If it's not incompetence, there's nothing that justifies not having zero rape, zero trafficking, zero slavery society worldwide. Of boys, girls, women, men, whatever. Now, another thing that came up was the death threats of people even towards their families. This notion of pride and honor that does not honor the feminine because it relies on a courtesan rape of infants that later would say this whore, this not, this married, this whore, this Madonna, this whore, both of them horrifically raped, the men horrifically raped, as a rite of passage, where they have to take another oath or another, and if somebody talks, then they're decapitated, but they cannot not talk because to be sane, safe, healthy, happy, communication, speech, talking about things is important. Now, another thing that came up, and that was in the dream, Venus in Capricorn with Sun. Venus is a sign of design, Saturn is structures. And there was a discussion where somebody said, well, how should that building look? How should that structure look? And then they were talking about, well, but if you don't know how to do the job, or if you don't know, if you're not qualified to do the job, then why did you ask for the job if it was about designing a home, designing a structure? And then in that dream, I was explaining to that person, well, the culture I'm coming from, we take the job, we take the opportunity, and we learn as we go. Okay, kind of like before I was becoming, for example, a TA in university, I was listening to Richard Branson, and he said, if somebody offers you an opportunity, grab that opportunity. If you're not qualified, just grab that opportunity and learn as you go. And this is something that was collapsing into a notion in an older society where to do the job was to participate in those rite of passages, which are horrid ritual abuse that negates sovereign decision making. And then they would be held accountable for the decisions that they made, that were basically mind controlled and extorted. And so, and the expectation that people would know that this is the right of path, would know that, but those jobs are not to design a building, are to be at decision-making junctures regarding things that are supposed to be public, they're supposed to be representative. Now, if you violate someone's sovereignty, you're not representative. Venus points, okay, Venus conjunction with the Sun are reminding us that we can't excuse away and I will say that example. There was in an energy reading is somebody that might be going through sadicity, and they were trying to put someone through that rites of passage, and that someone had to isolate themselves from literally whether it's the friends, the family, everyone, because everything was setting to put them through that rite of passage that is inhumane. And the word inauguration might even apply here. Now, they may have felt shame that that person had to cut contact with literally everybody, including their family, because they were, and here's the thing, the reason that they were spotted as a talent, let's say, was originally because they have their spirit finger on the sands of time. They know to identify the trends. And this person was trying to say to people, and it can be different people in different contexts, okay? They're trying to say, well, here, the world is going here. The world is going here. And they were not shaming, blaming, or bashing. They were not going through the, let's say if there was a Me Too and everybody was litigating, this happened to me, this person did it, they were going a completely different route. It was like, wait a second, it's an intergenerational gap. There is the role of satire. There is the role of freedom of speech. There is the way that people, the way that things affect people intimately. That is the training process of the decision makers. And they saw that something here really needs to change and that the world is changing towards something. Now, this created a series of collisions, intricate emotions, because what I'm seeing here is respect that is not founded on hierarchy. And for anything Capricorn, it's very difficult because Capricorn is expecting respect and giving respect as per rank. And here we have something that doesn't even know what its rank. For example, they could think that they were being trafficked and while they were actually being inaugurated. And so and alternatively, they could be just doing their thing, or if they identify trends, then in certain society we say, how come this person is a prophet? It's like, what do you mean prophet? Why do you predict the future? I don't know. You think about it, you open a business, you predict the future trends, or you do something with it, or you do research. Okay, you see what that's just a part of doing me. I don't know, and that can be creating a spark of a lot of all the worldviews and the ways that things were seen next to these people is collapsing into, well, our current paradigms are not suffice. And those people tell them, of course, that's the meaning of revolution, whether it's scientific, spiritual, societal, and so on and so forth. It is happening because our previous dogmas were not suffice. Now, Capricorn is one of the most challenging placements where such a change can go. Because this is where, you know, I talked about the fact that this Christmas, churches, and particularly the Gothic churches, the Gothic looking with the high ceilings churches, and the architecture was around seeing the divinity. I know, well, I don't know how it was like in Amsterdam. I know that, for example, the Cologne church and this pretty much Gothic church was about the divine being higher than the human. And those structures were burned. And I also saw that in the people in their 60s sharing their opinions about it, saying, no, the connection to the divine is through the gnosis, and these artificial structures of the clergy are basically, the structure of the clergy is basically being burned down with that. And that reminded me a lot of Protestant religion, and I predicted Protestant to go big with Neptune in Aries. So even if there may be things about the architecture where I don't know the entire history of the architecture, but the way that this is being perceived, and the raison d'être in which it was done, is basically coming away from the Capricorn into the Sovereign. And this is why Venus Sun is so challenging here, because um, the younger generation here and the older has respect in a way that is not by rank. It is respectful, but in a way that is not by rank. And it's not disregard of rank, it's looking at the actual, what are we actually looking at? And if there is a problem to tend to, then tending to that problem. And something very different, something very compatible with Aries, because if we think about, let's say, in age of war, all the structures are collapsing. It means that people that aren't qualified for the job, let's say if tomorrow, I don't know, something breaks, no medicine people at all, none of the people around had any course how to, I don't know, seal a wound or whatnot, would still try to, like, would still try to, we won't just leave people there. And in a very real way, this is happening now with many, many things. So what what was expected is no longer. And I think when I think about the Me Too in terms of structure, okay, what happened at the Me Too? New generation of people arrives. Let's say arrive to academia, arrive to the workplaces, arrive to this. Right? They're not always coming from certain lineage, and if they do, they're changing a lot of things about their lineage. People go to study things that their family didn't study before, or and then what happens? The expectation that the older generation had is like, oh, they go here, they want to climb up the ladder. Well, then they probably, for example, I was reading a book that was put on the train, very likely by social engineering, about Norway. And very famous writer, and in one of the scenes, he described a person that was in the Norwegian structure, and he meets a girl, and he said, well, he wants to take that girl to the hotel. And he said, oh, she's very ambitious, it's not going to be a problem. That was the expectation. And that expectation followed through. This is Capricorn. Whether it was a good thing, bad thing, that was the way that the ranks worked. And then comes this new generation. So what the fuck is that? That's human trafficking. That's drug trafficking. That's and the people in the previous generations, they don't understand what's happening. It's like, well, if you don't know how to do the job, then why do you? I was like, but the job is not. I came to learn. I came to, I don't know if it's secretariat or be a secretariat. Like, what is this thing? Now, here is another thing that comes up from the new generation. And the new generation is not just of age, it's about Basically, the new people that tend to things. And something was coming up about a certain family, whether somebody has intelligence job that was connected to family, and there can be two surnames or more than one surname, and and that could have created interpersonal thing, whatnot. But here's the thing: there's certain information, and to believe certain information, we would need to have true cohesion. Information that was achieved without zero rape, zero trafficking, zero slavery is not cohesive information, because this is information that was fragmented and fractured like the souls of the people. So, for example, if somebody comes to me and say, "Here, that and that happened in your family," or "Your father associated with that and that," and I'm like, "Wait a second, I'm not out ruling what you have to say, but to really have the true cohesive information, I would need a setting of zero rape, zero trafficking society." Now, of course, there is the question of we need zero rape, zero trafficking, zero slavery to have true cohesion, to have true information. And to get there, we need information that and comprising the picture from very fragmented things. So of course that's a challenge. Um, and and yet, going back to the Uranus Saturn sextile, the entire structure of the world is changing. No one, absolutely no one, could claim that any sovereign individual cannot have their sovereignty needs met. Man, woman, child, adult, bloodline, doesn't matter. Because if we could change all that, there is no reason we couldn't do that. And no one, absolutely no one, could claim for, hey, that's the structure, that's the right, that is changing. Now, this is also the context of Venus point conjoining the sun for such from 12 degrees all the way to the 18 degrees, involved with Mars, with Saturn about to conjoin Neptune and sextile in Uranus, and applying to sextile Pluto again. There's nothing that cannot be transformed for the best, for the sovereignty, well-being, sexual sovereignty of each and every individual. And no one, absolutely no one, can hide that. The old ways, the silence in the rank, that all of these things are like they need to be shed like the layers of an onion, and they can be. Now, the people that are going through the crisis of the old and the new, and those that mythicize the old and try to reinstall that, will have to explain themselves to people that not only speak truth to power, they're also saying, hey, I respect you. The way I see respect is sovereignty. It's not the hierarchy and the rank. Now, I know that there's an entire Pluto in Capricorn generation, but they are not the only generation around. And they are the ones that were set to change the way people climb up the ladder, which means set to change. They are the ones who will be very exposed to those rites of passages, being those ranks. And they will expose the entire rite of passage, the rituals, what behind the rituals. Think about when Pluto went through Capricorn, what was exposed? What was the Mitu basically undermining? The foundation of the entire hierarchical structure, which also undermines the next sign, which is the way that decentralization is used to hide control. It basically means that no excuses. It cannot be that people can use rank to justify People not having housing, food sovereignty, income that is supportive of their well-being. It's not if somebody can, they do a job of corruption to buy the food, but then they can't absorb the food, and then they have, oh, they have all the nice feelings, but they also have something that negates food absorption. And everybody that already wants, okay, okay, shut up about it. Okay, okay, let's close this up. No, these things need to change. It's not about the image of change, not about the gaslighting of change. And however triggering that is, people grew up as dead alive in this society.